I don't have a Mac. My machine's running off of a Windows machine, and that's just due to that's my familiarity. We're getting a little bit of feedback, so we'll go with that temporarily. But we'll see a lot of stuff here, and one of the reasons as well, I do have a MacBook at home. I could have done this on. Most of the stuff we're going to see here tonight is platform agnostic. You can do it in anything. But one of the tools I have is a Microsoft-based tool that only runs on Windows on recent versions of Vista 7 and Windows 8. I am running Windows 8, so you will see some other variants. I'm one of the probably 12 people in the city running Windows 8 right now. A little about me. I have more hair there. As Kurt mentioned, I'm the manager of technology advancement at DMT Development Systems Group. I've been with the company going on 10 years now, and in my role, I've been a software developer, developer manager, project manager, business analyst, and my current role is actually bridging the gap between technology and business solutions. So I'm the kind of guy that will go in and talk geek to the developers, but then talk business to the client as well. So the topics that I'm covering tonight, which have a little bit of search engine optimization, just setting the stage so we have a foundation of what to talk about later. Then going into Google Analytics and taking a look at what's going on there, going into Google Webmaster Tools and looking at what's going on there. This is a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis, is come up with these strategies, work on implementation strategies, and then help measure what's actually going on in the site. So what we're seeing is probably about over 50% of my work week, what I do there. My other job, which is recent, is the editor-in-chief of comicbook.com. Now, I'm also doing a lot of webmaster stuff for them too. We implemented in the last few months a new search strategy that we're implementing there, measurement strategies for everything that's going on, just making sure we're actually getting the traffic to the site. We've seen a recent drop, but that's mostly due to our hosting provider causing us significant issues. And I'm actually going to cover some of those things when we start talking about managing your website and measuring what's going on as well. That sums me up for what I do, pretty much 16 to 18 hours of any given day, including weekends. If there are any questions as we go through, just ask. If I'm going to cover it later, I'll say, let's hold off on that. But I will answer all the questions that anyone has, at least to the best of my knowledge. Anything to start? Any questions to start? Beauty. So we have broken this kind of into two halves because we do have a break halfway through. And I've tried to segment it, like we had on the website, into two distinct pieces. The first half is working and setting the foundation of what we want to do and understanding what the tooling is that we'll be looking at. Setting a goal for your website, SEO strategization, which if you're running a website, you really do want to focus a lot of cases on the search engine optimization because there is a lot of drive to it. But there is also a lot of gotchas when you're doing it that you want to be careful of in some cases, especially within the last year if you're doing a lot of Google search focus and with a lot of their optimizations to the algorithm that they've been putting into play. Then we'll take a look at some of the analytics tools that are out there and some of the webmaster tools that are out there. The second half is really going to be going into the tools themselves. So my second half of tonight, I have a slide for each of those that basically lists the tools, and that's it. The rest of it is going to be going into Google Analytics, going into Google Webmaster Tools. And if there's questions you guys have, that's what I want to focus on, is drill down how can we come up with decisions based on the information that we see. As we go through, because I don't have access to everyone's analytics to help you with specific questions, what I've done is taken two websites that we'll look at. One is, as I mentioned, comicbook.com, and we'll see some of the items within the site and what we're doing to make things better. Some of the past trends, some of the activities we've gone through, and I'll talk about some of those elements. Additionally, there's a second site I'm working on for a local charity called CHKV. This is not a friendly site right now. It's not a pretty site, but this is one that a couple of individuals put together some time back, and myself and a designer friend are in the middle of redesigning and putting a new facelift, some new strategies in place for them. So we can also take a look at some of their past metrics, see what they have, and we have some ideas for the strategy. Ultimately, the business decision, the guys who own the charity make the final say, but some of the recommendations we're putting into play. What's different between these two sites in advance is the infrastructure of each of them. So this one is, every page is a static PHP page. It's just hand scripted. Everything's going, actually it's static HTML. I'm in the process of at minimum putting them on PHP. The other one is a full WordPress instance. So there's a lot of other optimization components with WordPress that you can utilize. So how many people here use WordPress on a regular basis? Okay, over 80% of the room. So there's a couple of SEO tools that can help with bringing the system up to speed, plugins you can use, and there's some really, really good ones that can give you a lot of benefit in terms of measuring how your site will rank, which can then help drive traffic, and you can measure with analytics and webmaster tools. So I used a lot of Google-ish words there. Does this sound good? Is there anything else we should change before we dive in and go any further that you guys want to see that I haven't mentioned, at least in a high level? Okay. A lot of the stuff we will see, I'll preface with this, is going to be at a fairly high level, because really to dive in, it takes time. And some of the numbers we see and some of the tools are very, very in-depth, where Google Analytics I've done in my own organization, I've done a full day with some of our people on a single site of diving in and some of the information you see there and understanding what's going on. The biggest thing with these tools is there is no right answer, and that's the hardest thing to wrap your mind around. This is what it looks like is going on, but you have to draw the inferences for how that happened yourself. You can see I got X number of visitors. Okay? What does that mean? In what context? There's a lot of different dimensions to put all these numbers into play to really come up with a strategy as to what you want to do. That may not make a lot of sense right now. Hopefully it will as we go through a little more, but we'll see. And we'll see what happens. So I have both laptops simply because I forgot to print up any of my supplementary notes, so they're sitting on this one while I have the presentation up here. Goal setting. So I'm going to start with the foundation. So as you build a website, some of what we want to think of is, what do we want to achieve with our website? So there's a lot of stuff you can do with a website. With comicbook.com, we're a news site. We're putting out information on comics. We're putting reviews. We're putting upcoming press releases from the publishers. For movies, we're putting all of that kind of stuff up there too. With the charity organization CHKV, we're doing stuff more to outline the purpose of the charity. So as we do each of those sites, we're setting what we want to achieve with that website. With your personal blog, it might just be you want to get your voice out, you're focusing on a specific topic, and that's fine too. It's just knowing what you want to get out of your site, because if you don't know what you want to get, you don't know how to measure it. You don't know how to, am I successful? Did this get me to where I want to go? Otherwise, it's a bunch of numbers which, hooray, I got 20,000 visitors. Hooray, I had 100,000 page views on this page. But what does that mean to you? Is that a good thing? Or is that a bad thing? If the 100,000 page views are on a 404 page, obviously that's a bad thing. But if they're on your homepage only and people leave, that's also not a good thing. So it's great you got homepage, but no one's going into your site to find out any additional content. So it's looking at some of that information to take it to the next step. So when you do your site, you do want to define your success criteria. What are you looking at in order to say, I made it? And that's never going to be static. What you define today might be valid for a month. Then it might change, because your site is going to evolve over time. Your content is going to evolve over time. What you want to do is going to evolve over time. If it's a blog, if it's a business, and you're doing product, you'll add more product. You'll put new versions. You'll have new contact people. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get people to fill out a data capture form to get more information? That's a possible goal that you want to achieve. I want 10,000 leads. Okay, how do I do that? You optimize for that. I want people to read this topic. I want to be the expert in this topic in the field. Okay, you can do that too. But it's knowing what you want to get that goal. Maybe it's both, and that's fine too, because then you can put practices into play to get all of that. Nothing really is the limit except for what you're willing to put into it to make it achieve. It's not going to come just by sitting there and poof, you've got the numbers. So why do we set the goals? I mentioned some of this already. Narrow down the purpose of your site. This will evolve, but at least you're going to have something you want to achieve in the short term. When we look at some of the analytics, you'll see the CHKV and the comic book. You'll also see my personal blog, which I put a post up today for the first time in probably 9 months, basically saying I'm here tonight. It's more for an example purpose of some other items that I'll show, but my blog I let go to the wayside. So what do I want to achieve with it? My goal right now is to actually start using it again. So that's the first step. Hooray. Hooray for me. But the focusing on what you want to measure, we talked a little bit here as well. Do we want to focus on organic search? Are you familiar with what organic search is, what that means? Anyone not? Couple, okay. So organic search is what the search engines find to bring you to your site, contrasted to the paid search like AdWords. So with paid search, you're saying, here are the keywords I'm doing, and someone searches for this. I want X number of impressions. I want to show this many times, or here's what I'm paying, and if they click through, I pay that to Google or whomever your ad provider is. With organic search, it's what the search engines find as they peruse your site. They find the content, they put it into the context that they need in order to drive people to your site, in terms of the quality of your site, in terms of how well your site is compared to other sites of equal or similar information. And you'll find, if you're not already aware, that Google's algorithms can sometimes be a real big pain in the butt as you try to optimize, because then by the time you optimize for this, they've rolled out a new update, and now you got to optimize for something else. It's complete randomness. But there are ways to make sure you are at least in the game. If you are going to any SEO company that does that, just out of curiosity, if they say they guarantee you this, don't go with them. No one can guarantee that except for going into Google, and they won't do it. They're the only ones who can automatically go in the database and say you're number one. Social interaction. This is one that's growing a lot in terms of using Facebook, using Twitter, using Pinterest. Instagram is kind of tapered off for Pinterest in some cases these days. Google Plus is growing in some. Depending on who you ask, Google Plus is growing. In some other ways, it's kind of dwindling. It never got a huge adoption to begin with, but since Google Business, all the Google Places is now being merged into there, it will probably revamp in some way.
I always wondered where the link from the social account to the website is. Is it strictly just based on URL that you list in your profile?
I'll showcase a little bit of that in a bit. We do have that set up with our comic book one to showcase some of that. So if you can hold off. Okay, blog comments and discussion. If you're running a blog, maybe you don't care about traffic from Facebook, but you want to have the discussion points or people reading your views on your site and opening up comments at the bottom. That's one thing we tried to do at Comic Book for a while, but we're also trying to do discussion on so many other social networks that we don't see excessive amount here. We see a breadth over a number of different facilities. I don't necessarily agree with this, but some of our owners of the site and the business that runs it do. We're at a bit of odds over how we want to approach that. So we'll look at, that is a valid goal. If you're running a personal blog, getting people there, if there's discussion, people liking it, that's a way you can measure the validation of your site too. You've got the traffic and people are commenting. If you're doing an e-commerce site, that's a no-brainer. If they buy something, you can measure how many products got bought on your site. That one directly translates into revenue. So if you made $10,000, I think you can justify some of the work you put into the site if you're doing that. So long as you weren't projecting making $100,000, then you've got other problems. And then communication strategies. This is one that, I'm not going to cover all of these, by the way. I'm just putting some points up there. But the communication strategy sometimes gets lost because people think that that's your social interaction. But it's not just that. This could be advertising in other mediums. If you're putting something, say, on a park bench, like we see the automotive companies locally, put something on a park bench, on a billboard for the realtors especially. You get a URL on there. Sometimes that will redirect to another location, and then you can measure that redirect as to how effective a billboard was versus a newspaper ad, because you can put measurements behind unique domains for each of those facilities. A lot of times, email blasts, you can stick values in there that can measure the effectiveness of click-through campaigns in these emails too. So you're putting out information in 10 different mediums. You can actually measure those independently to find the best bang for your buck going forward if you're doing that as a business decision. And Google can help you with that as well, Google Analytics, with their campaign tracking, so long as you put the right parameters in play in advance. All that makes sense? Lose anyone?
They use those little square things with all those pixelated, not a barcode.
The QR codes?
QR codes, thank you.
QR codes can. That can be one of the communication strategies, because with a QR code, if it's scanned in on your phone, the destination can just be a URL. So if it has a measurement code, some of the campaign tracking for Google that takes you to a certain page on your website, you can absolutely measure the effectiveness of that here. We looked into using them a couple of times, but we didn't get a lot of uptake. For a while, they were the next best thing since sliced bread for business marketing. How often do you see them these days? I see them more being advertised on someone's website, but that's pointless because you're already on the website. There's no point in scanning your phone on the website and then it comes up on your phone and your desktop's right here and you've just taken a picture of your screen on your phone. That defeats the purpose. But there are ways around it. There are some companies that have done it. I have no personal experience in effectively using a QR code strategy. And then there's conversions of another kind. So we mentioned stuff like, I just want to collect leads as a good one. So a conversion is, what am I doing with my customers? Are they getting to where I want them to go on my site? Whatever I need them to do. So there's a lot of different things you can do. You don't need to do any of these. You could do whatever. You could just be posting for the sake of it and not care. That's another option. But the point here, with all of these different items, no two websites are going to be the same. What I have for one of my client sites is not going to be the same as what you'll have for one of your sites or what you'll have for one of your sites. Everything is going to be different. So today I'm going to kind of narrow the focus a little, look at the purpose of the site, help narrow some of that focus, organic search considerations and implications, including a couple of best practices that I've put into play and have seen some measurable results. It's not going to be the Holy Grail, but it's some good practice that I've seen improvement myself. Some people may disagree, and that's fine. Not everything is going to work for every site. So that's the hard part of saying this is the end-all be-all. And then we'll look at a couple of communication strategies and how we can measure some of that, specifically focusing on some of the social elements. That'll be more as we look at some of the sites themselves. So imagine this is your website. It's in a strip mall. It's surrounded by a bunch of other businesses. How do you draw attention to yourself? What makes you stand out? How do people find you? They can wander around and find you, but on the web, that's huge. You're not just a little 10-store strip mall that you can go up to. I'm not even going to try to guess too many sites just out of Winnipeg alone to actually find a business to bring some value to you unless you got to stand out from the crowd. So what you need to do with some of these elements is, just want to make sure I'm not jumping ahead here. Yes. You want to define your brand, and you kind of want to define where you stand. So if you're in this strip mall and your next door neighbor is, I'm not going to try to knock anything, it's just going to seem this way. If you're a business and you're next to a McDonald's restaurant or you're next to a keg, does that say something about your business, even unofficially, to a user in the back of their mind? It might. So who you're next to in a physical storefront helps make that decision. When you're talking on the web, there is that little bit in the background which can impact that as well. If you're hosting your own solutions, and I'm going to go a little geeky here, if you're doing your own hosting solutions, you're able to control all of that because you have the servers, it's all in your facility, it's in a co-location, whatever. If you're on a shared infrastructure, I've seen instances of some sites, and Comic Book went through this several years ago, where our traffic plummeted because we were on a site that was also on a server that was being shared by a spammer. So that whole IP address, it got negatively hit, it got identified, and this site plummeted in terms of anything we saw on our rankings. Through nothing we did, but through who we were next to. We moved to our own server with, in this case, we moved out of, I don't know who they were with then, they moved to GoDaddy, which is where we're with now, and our traffic went back up because we're no longer affiliated. That IP address is not being blocked by, or on a blacklist for anything that's going on. So we actually saw our traffic go down because no one found us with search. So knowing where you're going and who you're next to can actually have an impact. Go with someone reputable is what it boils down to. The owners and the previous guys who ran the site went with the lowest cost solution they could find, which is not always going to be your best option. When you're doing your site too, if you're doing, say, a blogspot.com or a wordpress.org site, you're kind of kelly.wordpress.org or something like that as your default. And that's fine because at least WordPress is a valid domain. It's going to help. If you're setting your own one up, two things with a domain name. One, make it relevant to your site. Don't choose some product that has absolutely nothing to do with your site just to kind of drive the traffic. Oh, my competitor is Bill's Hardware, but I'm really selling plates. I'm a cutlery store. That makes no sense. Don't put that as part of your site. You'll get dinged because there's no relevance. But the one that seems to be causing a lot of confusion, this is an experience I've had, is regionalization. So if you do a website that's a .com or a .net or a .org or one of those, where is your website located? Who is your audience? You don't know. If you're doing a .ca, who is your audience? Canada. .co.uk, you're in the UK. Those suffixes can help you in certain ways, but they can also hinder you in others. So my day job at DMT, we're dmt.ca, that's our website domain. We don't rank well in google.com, a US search engine, because it's a .ca suffix. We don't rank as well in a .co.uk, .ca suffix. We don't have the .com. Some other company already has the .com. When the company was formed, we looked at a Canadian focus at first, and then we expanded out, but we didn't think that far in advance. If you get a .com, you get a .org, you get a .net, you're going to have a country agnostic domain. If you want to buy the .ca too, that's fine. But if you can get, if you're a business, get the agnostic domain because that's going to help you in the long run, because you can still do search routines and search practices on a country basis. And that can really help you because Google will give you different results depending on which Google you're on and which country you're on. As an example, I was on a work trip down to California. We're on google.com down there. Okay, here's my result set. I VPN'd into our work network here. I had a complete different result set with the same criteria, logged in as the same user in Google. It's because now I'm on google.ca versus google.com. If all you care about is Canada, go CA, doesn't really matter. If you're Canadian government, you probably don't need to care about going into the US market as much. You'll still be found because someone will type in Canadian government or something along those lines. But if you're a business, you want to keep that consideration in mind. Now, this is just an experience I had. I wanted to share that one because that has bitten us in the butt and some of our clients in the butt more than once when we've started growing outside of the Canadian market. So there's a whole bunch of now new suffixes, and you can also almost buy some custom ones these days too. They're starting to I don't know anyone who's purchased their own, but at one point I think Pepsi was trying to get a .pepsi suffix, and that was going to cost them at least $25,000 just to attempt the registration with ICANN, and then they still not guaranteed to get it and grow from there. ICANN's just out to make some money. So stick with what you got. We talked this one a little. Okay, any questions so far? Yes.
When I find sometimes that a new entity, I'll try to buy the .com and the .ca.
Yes.
And sometimes partly just to prevent someone else taking the name and then, just riding along on the coattails.
Yeah.
But if I do that, would you recommend that the site be just redirected to one of the sites through that method, or to build parallel sites, or to, like, if you were to do that, would you choose one site like the .com and drive all the .ca traffic there?
It would depend what your site wants to achieve. So if you're an online store and you're servicing, say, Canadian and US customers, I would buy the .ca and the .us versions. If your offerings are different per country, give it its unique domain. Now maybe you still want to use blah.com as your primary. You could do a subdomain of canada.blah.com or us.blah.com so that all the traffic goes through there, and then you can measure how many people are typing in blah.ca or blah.us. So there's no golden answer. We've done a lot of redirects for the language because we deal a lot, like we said, with automotive dealerships, where some of them have English and French language support on their website. So depending on domains that they purchase, we will do the redirect to the proper language version of the domain too. So in Canada, that's always another consideration, is not just a .ca, but a lot of times we'll have en.blah.ca, fr.blah.ca. I can't give you a direct do this or do this. It depends on your need. But I could make a case for both depending on the business. I know it doesn't answer your question, but does it hopefully address the question?
It's the same. Yeah, we've dealt with the very same.
Right.
Generally, if it's a Canadian scope, then we buy that and keep it, and then just buy the .com to cover the traffic that people would accidentally search for that.
Right.
And just drive them back to the main site.
My recommendation, though, would be to use as your primary live site a .com or a .net, simply because then you, in case you want to grow it, or in case you still want people from other regions to find that information, it's still accessible to them. So the .coms won't be kind of negated down from my experience, but the .ca in the US, it's less likely to show up if they're doing a search for any information. If you're not shipping a product to the US, it's moot. You don't really care. Anything else? Am I going too fast? I know there's a lot of stuff, so I just want to make sure I'm not. Okay. So what do we want to focus on for the strategy? These are just options of stuff that we've implemented too. So postings and articles. If you're doing a blog or you're doing a news site, we made the decision at Comic Booked, our first step in a search strategy is let's get our articles ranked. We've got a lot of material, including videos. We've got a lot of images. Are those important? Absolutely. If we try to tackle everything at once, will we just be running in 25 different directions at once when we have pretty much all volunteer staff, like myself? Absolutely. We've all got day jobs. We've all got other things to do. So we tackle a problem at a time. We made postings and articles our first priority, because that will bring people to the site looking for specific content. If you're an e-commerce site, you might have a product showcase, and that's where you want to focus your time. Get into each of the products and the elements there. It's similar to an article, but it's slightly different in how you might promote it, because you can put more metadata in code on product pages to describe the product more for search engines. Google does a lot, but Facebook is rumored to be working on a search engine which will leverage your social network for things along those lines too. They've hinted at it. They've not said we're releasing it on such and such a day, but honestly, that's its next obvious step for something else with all of the data they already have about each of us, for those of us who are on it. I know a few people not on it simply because they have too much information on each of us as you go through the site, and they're monitoring all your traffic. or at least they're trying to. There's now legal implications in place in other countries. If you're in the UK, for example, or most of the European Union, if you're serving any sites there, it is actually illegal to put tracking cookies on a person's machine without their permission. So even Google Analytics technically can violate some of the EU regulation that have recently gone into play, which has made us serving some of our clients in Europe a little more frustrating in terms of giving them some, how is your website doing, assistance there. I mentioned images because you can easily put a focus on images with your search strategy. Same with videos. There are multiple ways you can highlight both of those elements, including their own sitemaps within your site. So Google image search can find them, and Google video search can find those items. The video is growing leaps and bounds with HTML5 and some of its practices that have recently come out. News is a huge one. So it may be different than a posting or an article on your site, but really focusing on press releases and what's going on. We don't do a lot at Comic Book for press releases, apart from posting someone else's, like some Marvel or DC. But we do have the occasional one, and those are ones that we may not highlight our About Us page, but we will highlight any news that we want to push out. The store is expanding, the store is moving, that kind of thing. It is a physical storefront when I talk about that too, so that's where some of the experience comes from. It's located in the States, but we have a physical storefront and the website. And maybe your strategy is everything, and that's not unreasonable, but it's a matter of, do you have the effectiveness and staff in place to look at it, to understand what's going on, to measure it, and then you can do something about it. Because really, you can measure all you want. If you don't have the ability to do something about it, a client buy-in or the know-how to dive into the code at times to do it yourself, or find the right WordPress plugin to do it for you, you're spending all the effort for little to no value. So organic search. We mentioned this briefly earlier. When we look at organic search, we're looking at this block here in the green. In the red is the paid area. Google always tosses one up, and it's highlighted with a little yellow background, but sometimes people just click on it. You don't notice it. It might still be the most relevant, but it's hidden in. Bing has started not putting it at the top, but interspersing it in their entire result set. So you could get 3 organic searches, then paid. You get 2 more paid that are showing up there. So, but they do highlight them differently, so it does stand out. If you're on a laptop, it stands out depending on what slight angle your monitor is sitting at on your desk, if you see that background color or not, because it is very subtle. But when you're talking organic, this is what we're talking about. So our search engine here, I did comic books, big surprise with me. Got a title, we've got a description, the link is there, fairly straightforward. The title can actually be a very important part of doing your search engine strategy, because that's what differentiates every single page within your site. So a unique title helps significantly. Duplicate titles, not so much, because what page is the most relevant to what the user is looking for? So creating custom content like that is huge, and I'll get to a little bit of some of the best practices in a minute. The description, there is not a ton of SEO value to that description, but there is a ton of value to the user when they see this page to give them some context. Should I click through? The words here won't necessarily be indexed by Google, but other search engines might. So the other item that a lot of people used to do more of, are you familiar with meta keywords? Who uses meta keywords on their site? Okay, meta keywords has no value in North America anymore. Google has stopped looking at them. Bing and Yahoo have stopped looking at them. But if you're serving some of the European countries or Asian countries, those meta keywords field, it has incredible value to your site. So Yandex, which is the biggest one in Russia, looks at that and helps rank your site significantly with those keywords, more so than the title. So its algorithms look at that more than it will the page title. So knowing where you're delivering and where your focus is will help. there's our top 3 that you want to focus on. Google, Bing, and Yahoo. Yahoo is now, its organic search is actually being powered by Bing. So Microsoft is providing organic search results to both Bing and Yahoo. You won't see the same results between them. There's other little caveats Yahoo still does. And that partnership was done so Microsoft doesn't go into the paid search arena. So Yahoo is still running their own paid search routines. So a lot of the paid search you'll see on Bing is actually powered by Yahoo. It's a nice little partnership. Yandex, the biggest search engine in Russia, it's, depending on the site that I've seen that we've serviced, it can be significantly more than Google. The other one is Baidu. Baidu is the largest one in China. Many of you who look at your sites and see weird stats and weblogs, you might see the Baidu bot. They like to scan your site and they like to try to break it like crazy and throw errors on your site left, right, and center, anything they can find to index it. And a lot of their stuff outside of China, they will index and they will make copies and scrape your entire site and store it in their own infrastructure locally so everything stays within China. It's a pain because the scraping takes off a lot of your bandwidth and you guys are paying for it ultimately. We have put a lot of practices in, except for where we have a Chinese client, to actually block the Baidu bot from scanning our sites, period. It means some of our sites don't get indexed by them, but they're also not wasting our bandwidth and scraping all of our content. Any questions on this before I move on? Okay. How many of you are not familiar with different ranking criteria with search engines? Or can I just go, I'll zip through this if they're not. Okay, a few. So we'll cover this fairly quickly. Make sure your links work, especially if it's internal to your own site. Don't have 404s in your own site, link not found. Just validate your own site. And there's a tool that I use regularly, the Microsoft tool I mentioned, to help with that. I'll showcase that after. Make sure your content can be indexed. If there's no text to index, there's nothing for it to find. If you have videos, there are ways to put metadata on videos. There are ways to put metadata on images as well. So at least those items on your site can be found. But text content on the page will have the words that the bots will find and will index for you. And that's what you'll find in search engines. Proper website structure, and by that I mean proper HTML. Make sure that you're following HTML guidelines that you can validate with one of the validators. We saw a significant decline after we used a certain text editor, one version that actually wasn't closing all our paragraph tags when it created it for all the content. It would open the paragraph tag, never close it, or put a random close somewhere else in there for some reason. It didn't look off in the editor, so we thought nothing of it, but when you scan the code, there was bad HTML and stuff just didn't validate, and Google's starting to use proper page validation as one of its ranking criteria. Not a high one, but it's in there to make sure your site loads. These two are part of what Google did last year to help nip in the bud. We talked a little bit about spam earlier, so if your site is associated as being a spam site, you're going to rank lower on a blacklisted. Ads, they're trying to tone down the amount of ads. Even though they sell it, they have an entire ad base which pays a lot of their revenue in some cases. Ads can really hurt a site depending on how many you have and where they're positioned. So I'm going to switch over for 1 second to Comic Book. Right off the hop, we've got an ad. Can you see the content of the site really? No. We're getting hit for this. I'm running into conflict with our site owners as to how best to manage this right now. But because the site itself and the content is pushed down below a virtual fold line, like we'd find in a newspaper way back in the day, what would be in that first half that you would see, we're getting dinged. We're not getting the results we should. Further down in here, I don't know what ad vendor we're using. We're getting ads tossed in with our listings, and that's fine because it's not at the top of the page. It's not negatively pushing content down away from the end user. But this ad here is actually causing us problems. I've already successfully won an argument to remove another one that was up there. But this one is still causing us problems because there's really no reason for it to be there apart for us to get some revenue. But that's not helping anything either if you can't get to the content of the site. Google has algorithms in place. Last year, their two major updates were called Penguin and Panda that focused on spam and focused on ads. Those are their algorithm updates. Fun stuff, huh? Site performance is starting to become a factor. How fast does it take your page to load for an end user experience?
Do caching plugins just mask the speed, and therefore, with most engines we get there on the first try, it doesn't matter? Like, is it almost like a facade to the engine?
It depends on how you do your caching technique. If you set stuff up to do browser level caching, there's no value. It's basically, the bots don't care because they're not going to execute JavaScript. They're not going to have cookies. They're not going to have all of that stuff. If you're doing on the server, one of our sites, we actually pre-cache every single page. So we launch the site. There's actually a routine that generates, this isn't my work one, but another one I do with some friends. It's a Ruby one that actually generates static HTML each time. So even though it's a dynamic infrastructure, it serves it up as static content and then just starts plugging in. You put a comment on this blog, it appends a static file, so it's much more responsive. So the end user experience is much, much faster. There's a number of techniques for optimizing, zipping up all of your extraneous content like your CSS and your JavaScript files. You can minify those, basically take all long strings that might be one variable name of 20 characters long. There's tools that will bring that down to say variable name is A, and then replace all instances with that and compress all the code down for you, which then can significantly improve the user experience. JPEGs have been recently becoming a problem, especially when you're looking at image size on mobile devices. And they're looking at that because Google has their own mobile bot now to scan of performance for a phone structure. So you can actually do image resizing, different techniques. There's a methodology called responsive design, which can help you in terms of your UI positioning and different assets that are delivered out to the end user. It won't necessarily help with, you still have to load all your CSS and all of your JavaScript files because if the user's browser suddenly goes very large, it still has to load all of those supplementary files. Again, there's no clear answer. There are techniques. Your biggest impacts for performance aren't going to be your raw HTML files. They are going to be JavaScript files. If you're using a number of jQuery plugins, those can be quite huge, especially if you aren't familiar with them or if you're referencing 50 different plugins on the same page. That's going to be huge because each of those calls is another call out to the server. Give me this, give me this, give me this. And your browser can only do 3 or 4 requests in parallel. So it's here's 3 or 4 requests out, get it back, next 3 or 4, or this one's down, and kind of chop it down. If you use a minify technique, it can take all your JavaScript files, say 50 of them, and you can actually compress them into a single file. So you're only pulling one file down for an end user. It's much faster. That single file gets cached on your user's browser, and it's going to operate much more efficiently. That answer your question? Cool. So performance is a huge one, and there are measurement techniques within some of the tools to see what's going on there. Okay, I'm going to zip through some of these a little more quickly. So a sitemap XML file is an XML file that tells the bots where to find all of the relevant information in your site. This is my blog one, nothing fancy. As you can tell by the dates, I haven't done much in it very recently. But we've done, basically here, Google can see, okay, here's all the relevant pages that I care about. It might still scan the rest of my site to see if there's anything else, but I'm telling it, you need to pay attention to these. So I'm giving it the information it needs to find information quicker. Generally, you want to put this right in the root of your domain at the sitemap XML file. If you do this, you don't need to register it with the different search engines. It will find it automatically. You can call your sitemap file something different, but then you have to register it. Or if you want to put it in another location, you have to go tell Google where to look to find these files. So the big one is location, location, location. Put it in the root. If you have the ability all the time, it's going to automatically be found. Now, if your site is very large or you have multiple languages on your site, you may want to manage them slightly differently. One of our client sites at work, we service 20 different European countries and 26 languages within those countries as some nice combinations of one of our sites. So we've created a sitemap for each country language combination we support. And then we have a sitemap index file at the root level that we've registered to say, here's a sitemap file, look at this sitemap file, look at this sitemap file, look at this sitemap file. So that way we manage each market individually, but we're still giving Google and the other bots the information to know where to look to find all that information. Some basics on the actual HTML content. Put an alt attribute on all of your images that are relevant. So if your image is that of Batman, make it say Batman. If your image is a back button, you could make it say back. Or you could leave that one blank because there's no value to a search bot there. But you may still want the alt attribute for the tooltip for the end user on your site. So when you hover over and it pops up and it will say back. So you have options. But a good rule of thumb, anything that has an interaction point that the user can use or you want indexed, put an alt attribute with a value in it. Use header tags where it's appropriate, but only one H1 tag per page. If you use more than one, that's actually going to potentially ding you and will cause some negative impact on your site because it says, H1 says, this is the most important piece of information on this page. So if you have 3 of those, which is the most important piece of information on the page? The bot's not going to know. There's no relevance. Single URL structure. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail on that in just a second. And then we mentioned the page title and meta description earlier when we looked at the code snippet. Those are very key, especially the title. So one other thing I hinted at earlier is the context. So the context is going to be, where are you from? What are you looking at? This is a snippet that I have. It's got my lovely picture, which I hate, but it's the only one I have of me in recent memory that I'm willing to put anywhere online. But basically, this is my Google Plus picture. I've linked Comic Book to my Google Plus account and validated that connection. So if it's finding articles that's linked to my name and connected to this Google Plus code, it's showing that I am the author of this article. So it starts ranking me in terms of knowledgeable on certain topics the more I cover those same topics. So even if I'm not logged in, or if someone's not logged in, they'll still see the picture. But if it's one of my friends who are logged in, my posting here might actually rank higher than more truly relevant ones because of the relationship. So Google's starting to put contextual relationship in your Google Plus circles around your search as well. They're not doing it in full force yet, but they've started rolling pieces of that out, and we've seen differences where I'm logged in, I get a result set. I log out, I've got a different result set. Same browser, but I'm no longer logged into Google. So the context is now becoming much more interesting. So making sure your site follows certain structural patterns instead becomes much more relevant than saying, this is the best keyword. The social interaction is becoming huge. This is the best keyword, but 10 of my friends have liked it on Google+, so it holds more relevance to me. Facebook supposedly was going to be doing something like that with Microsoft, but that never really came to fruition. But if they do their own search engine, it's going to happen in full force there. The context is still relatively new. It's not something to worry too much about today, but it is coming down the pipe. So it's something more to keep in the back of your mind if you're managing a site. And if you have the ability to do any Google Plus shares, it's something to consider putting on your site if you don't have it, mostly because a lot of us are now logging into Google for Gmail and those other services. It's going to link through. Any questions on that?
Somewhat like Cloud then. Some of that would kind of tie in a way.
The Google
Is actually
yeah.
doing anything with SEO, but
The same idea of ranking relevance based on information that of people you're following. So it's taking that same idea of your circle of friends, in this case for Google Circles, and saying Jay is very relevant. Jay knows a lot about jQuery, so if there's topics that you've posted and is associated with your account, it will rank higher in my search results if I look for that phrase. It's in early stages, but I've seen little snippets of it still working here and there. It's not consistent either. So one search, even if you're logged in, will work, and the next you'll have something different. It's still not in full force, but it is going out there. Depends which of Google's server clusters you're probably hitting at that point in time, whether you'll see it working. So I mentioned the URL structure a second ago. When you guys build sites, do you think a lot about your URLs in advance, or do you just start building the site and go with the flow? Anyone just kind of let it go as is, or do you take time to strategize out your URL structure? Any strategizers? Some. So the URL structure has actually started to, we've done some changes in some of our client sites, and we've seen search improve significantly. Mostly due to different layouts to get to the same page. Duplicate content on a site is actually very, very bad unless you flag it as saying, yeah, I know this is duplicate content, so don't worry about this page. You can do that. But in theory, every one of those could point to the same page, depending on how your system is set up. Bots are now being tricky and trying to get to the same page by removing a www in the prefix or adding it if you don't have one. Can it resolve the page differently? If these strings don't match exactly, it's a different page according to the bots. It's doing an exact character match. So these two are very similar, but there's no end slash here. So it's a different URL that Google could index. Oh, well, this is on 5 different pages in the site. That's not a good thing. Which one do we send them to? So it's going to reduce that page ranking. Capitalization. They're tossing in random capital letters. Are you able to handle that and have a single URL path to go to that page? Unless you're accounting for that, you're going to have problems. Now, these can be handled in a number of ways in order to get around the problem. My work does a lot of ASP code. In one of the frameworks, the MVC framework, there's a library we've implemented that basically with one line of code, we can set the rules. Always make the URL lowercase, and always end in a slash. If it doesn't meet these criteria, it will automatically redirect the user to a page that meets that criteria, and with a code, an HTTP code, going back to the bot, saying, we permanently moved it over to this URL. So index this one, ignore this one. So that's going to help a lot. We now have a single URL pattern for every single page in our site. So it's only ranking the one page. It's not ranking every single instance. If you're working on more of a Linux PHP style, you can do that in a htaccess file, the same kind of rules, but you're writing those rules yourself. We found this one library that meant we didn't have to roll our own code to do that. It was pre-built for us. It was include one line of code and one reference, and we're good to go. But we can set the rules ourselves as we go through. So there's no golden rule set in stone, but I've been referencing to my clients, just use lowercase. It makes it easier. The mixed case, if you have a product name, you may want to do that, but is there value to it? Is a user going to type in a mixed case if they're just typing the URL in by hand? Probably not. But if you type in all caps, it's going to redirect to the proper one that you define, whatever your structure is. So we've seen increases of our sites when we have done this significantly, because now the bots only see a single location. What we did also notice was if we put a temporary redirect flag on that for it to go to the new destination, we saw no SEO increase, permanent redirect, so we told it just update every database record you have for this domain to be this one, and then Google will merge the multiple records into a single instance. It's now finding the single record, and you're good to go. It takes some time. It's not going to be an overnight process. You may be waiting a month, 2 months to see all of the relevancy happen, but you'll see noticeable increases over time. Does that make sense, or is that just confusing? Or have I confused everyone here and you want me to stop talking? I'm thinking the latter, but I'm the one up here, so tough. Okay, now we're going to set the stage for the second half for today. Yes?
It kind of feels like you're going over a lot of like what would be that last 10% of like your perfect optimized search result.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm on page 50 or whatever, you know, like obviously my site sucks. And you kind of talked about strategize your site. Like,
Yes.
I mean, how should you really be building your pages and linking and stuff so that you actually get up on the first couple pages? Like a lot of this stuff seems like, you know, the tweaking at the end. But like as far as like linking those and the H1 tag and structuring content,
Okay.
like how do you actually get your website in the first couple results?
Positioning the content on your page, the raw HTML, is moot. Like having a single H1 tag gives you header tags. Having multiple header tags indicate section titles that are going on within your site. This is single H1 tags. You will be permitted multiple H1 tags in future, simply due to the way HTML5 is set up. Is you could have a header H1 tag, you could have an article H1 tag as you start going through those different types of sections. Yeah.
I'm kind of talking about how like I guess most people said that we're using like WordPress or some kind of CMS
Okay.
tool. So a lot of the structuring is already
It's
handled for us.
right.
We're hoping that they're not, you know, screwing up the HTML.
Yes.
Like I'm just talking about like, you know, links within your site,
Okay.
external to the site, like your alt tags, not like actually making your site relevant so that it shows up so that you're actually
A lot of it is going to be the content you put in. So if your content sucks, it doesn't matter what you do to optimize the rest of your site. Your content sucks. Internal linking in your site helps a lot. So if you can link to relevant areas within your own website, that's going to increase your in-site link saying, this article is great, and you know what? It ties back to this information we had over here. So go over here. You don't have to search for it. We're going to tell you where to go within our site. The more you keep someone in your site and the relevance it is there, the more times that page will be indexed and found by Google as the bots start to go through.
like backlinks from other sites that are relevant. So like say if you've got like, you know, a race car site and forward link back to you.
Yeah.
It's actually just different bots.
Yes.
More of
The challenge there is you can't really go to Ford and say, can you put this link on your site? You're hoping that they do. Okay, you can do that. Most people can't. But inbound links from external sites, you have to be careful. And part of that is because there used to be a link building organizations. You would go to companies and say, here's $25,000. Put my link on X number of sites so my inbounds are huge, that they're great. And then that became a bunch of spam sites. Those just became ad fodder. And those actually lost relevance. So inbound links will depend as well on where they're coming from and the relevancy of its source. So if you had something from Ford.com coming to your site, Ford is high relevance, that would be good. If you had something from my blog coming to your site, not as much relevance unless I'm ranking very high in that subject myself. So the inbound link strategies or the external link inbound is very difficult to manage. And sometimes you may not want me linking to your site. Well, if I link to it, tough. Although Google is looking at ways in the webmaster tools where you can, in future, start to remove, you know what, I don't want Kelly's links to count towards mine. I exclude them from my rankings. So those tools are in the works. So those are so that answered a couple of the elements there.
all you can do is have H1 tags, proper header, alt tags, on your images, proper content.
If you don't have proper structure in your page, it doesn't matter what else you do. If you don't have just proper HTML code. If you don't have an H1, oh well. But so long as it validates to proper paragraph tags and proper image tags, you're going to have a validly structured HTML document that's not going to ding you in any way. Some of the elements here, sometimes that 10% will actually push you that extra step. The URLs, this actually changed our client's rankings from being on page 5 to page 1, just by not having it duplicate content. Because if you have 5 pages, different structures with the same content, it won't rank any of them high. But suddenly the pages are ranking high because there's only one way to get to that content. So this one is actually, even though it seems like it's a little thing, this is one of the biggest impacts to moving higher in rankings we've seen, of making sure you don't have the duplicate content syndrome on your site. If you are going to put duplicate content, and you have to for whatever reason, the same block of text, the same page 100%, you can flag it as what's with a canonical flag, and Google may choose to not rank it accordingly because you've taken the effort to say, don't do this. You can also flag individual pages to not be indexed or not follow the links if you don't want Google to go there too. Sections you can block off with a robots.txt file too. So if you have a registration page, you don't care if that gets indexed by a bot. Block that off so Google doesn't waste its time there and finding something that maybe won't execute properly for you. One more slide and then I'm good for the break. Well, 2 more, but it's just images, really quick. So if there's other specifics, I can chat with you after. So I'm going to cover what the analytics tools are, we'll mention in the second half, and then we'll take the break. So with analytics, there's 3 levels that you can go for analytics tools. First is a free solution, and Google Analytics is probably your most obvious solution for implementing on your sites. Because it's free, it's the most cost-effective solution. But it won't allow you to drill down into seeing what an individual person is doing within your site. If you want to start following user paths, we go into a couple of the paid solutions that are out there. So this one is Woopra. Has anyone heard of it or used it? Okay, a couple of people seem to have heard of it. I used it when it was free. It's now a paid solution, but it gives you a lot of real-time analytics. So you can see what's going on your site at any given point in time. I can see what my brother is doing on the site if I could identify him and see exactly what pages he went to, how long he spent on this page and on this page and on this page. That takes a lot of effort to manage too. It was good. I haven't tried it since it's free because I really don't want to, for a business site, it's like $2,000 a month. So I'm not going that way or recommending it to my clients when I don't have the time to analyze their metrics that much for them. But then you go to the uber high one of Omniture. This is probably the #1 paid analytics service out there, but it's huge. The reports are extensive. You can follow user paths, get heat maps, which are better than the free Google heat maps to see where people are clicking on the site. Google now has a paid analytics service. It's expensive, like $100,000 a year expensive at the base level to get it. So unless you really have a high client base that needs that kind of detail, yeah, you probably don't need it. The webmaster tools we'll look at. The 2 big ones are Google and Bing. We'll take a look at Google in the second half. Bing is pretty much the same, but it's going to give you some metrics on Bing and Yahoo. And then a couple of just quick SEO tools, ways that we validate sites before we launch or pages that are live. The Microsoft solution, I'll showcase that and I'll actually run it against a site while we're here. Just a small one, so it doesn't take forever. There's a couple of sites that will actually give it a specific URL and it will scan that site on the web for you live. Now it has to be a live, publicly available URL. You can't do a local host or an internal infrastructure, but it will scan just that individual page and rank you, give you a grade of A through F based on Google's criteria. And then I'm going to showcase a plugin for WordPress that we use at Comic Booked and I've used as well, called Yoast. Has anyone used Yoast before? A few. Which is actually really good and has helped us with Comic Booked increase our rankings as well. We'll talk some of the strategies after with the CHKV site. So we'll take the break now and we'll take a look at some of the information. We'll focus on CHKV past stuff when we look at the details of analytics and Webmaster. And I'll answer what questions I have. But the second half will just be, let's take a look at this report. Okay, where do you guys want to dive in to see more information, how we can interpret some of that information as well. So that I'd like Any questions you guys have, please toss up.
Cool. Okay. So we have round two. How much time do you think?
Well, it's all going to be going through examples.
Okay.
So if there's lots of questions, it'll be more based on where we want to go, but I'll give an
cool.
overview of everything.
Okay, I think we'll try to wrap up around a little after 9 or so.
About 5:10 after, so a little
5 or
bit.
10 after 9, if that works for
Okay.
people.
We started a little late.
So yeah, anybody who doesn't have an eval again, please flag me down. We've got some prizes to give away at the end for people that fill out their evals, so we'll definitely want to do that. If you still don't have one, just flag me down on the way back and I'll bring it over. And yeah.
All right.
Is
Cool.
everyone well fed? Did everyone eat? Okay. There's lots of food in the back if people still need it. So
Okay.
yeah, that's all I got to say.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks, yeah.
Okay, so the second part, we're going to look right at the tools. Like I said, there's not a lot of slides. If we take a look at the analytics slide, that's it. We're going to go right into Google Analytics. So even though I've mentioned Whooper and Omniture, those are paid services. They can take a lot of effort to set up sometimes and then to understand the data. But the advantages of those systems is you will get support service from those companies to help you generate your reports and bring all that data in. But is there value in it? Who knows? You can always start with Google, the free solution, and determine if you need to move up to a paid solution at a later time. So how many people here have never used Google Analytics before? Okay, about half. So I'm going to showcase in here quickly. I'll look at what CHKV is. So this is my interface. It shows me all of the accounts that I have set up. I'm not going to go through what an account, profile, yada, yada, yada is. But I'll showcase just some of the key elements that I've done here. So with CHKV, we've got some metrics. It's not a heavily trafficked site right now, and that's one thing we want to change. So the metrics here kind of suck. We've got a high point of the other day where we had 7 people visit, and that very well could have been me on a few machines and doing some analysis on the site in parallel. Google, when it tracks a user, is based everything on cookies on your machine. So if you visit once, it puts the cookie on your machine, it tracks what you're doing for a period of time. If you're idle on the site for, on average, 30 minutes, it's a new visit, but you're the same visitor. So it'll show that you came back as a returning visitor to your site. But because it's cookie-based, if you open it up in Chrome and then you open it up in Firefox, it's a new cookie. They don't share cookies, so you're 2 unique visits to the site. And a lot of times when you're testing, that can come and bite you in the butt. Because you think, well, no, I only visited once. No, you use 2 browsers, it's 2 unique visits. And that's one thing sometimes you really have to wrap your mind around if you're trying to interpret the metrics effectively. And that has caused some of our more account management staff who aren't as familiar with technology to not get their minds wrapped around that. I'm only going to give a high-level view of a lot of these elements unless there's specific questions, because there is a lot of information here. I know last year there was a 2-day seminar just on the introduction to this tool. So trying to do it in about 10-15 minutes and give anything uber relevant is going to be problematic, but I'm going to showcase some of the things that I look at regularly when I'm trying to define what we want to do with the site, if we're doing a redesign or if we're trying to implement next steps for a website. With Google Analytics, you get a bunch of information along the menu here. Real time is something new. So you want to see who's on your page right now? No one's on my page right now. That's not a shock. Hold on. I chose the wrong one to demonstrate real-time analytics. For Comic Booked, I've got 13 people on the site right now. We can see as they go through what's being looked at. We can see some of the sources. So Stumble Upon is driving traffic to our site. Right now, Facebook has no one on our site who's started from there, or Twitter. Those tend to be 2 of our top, but Stumble Upon is growing for a nice referral source for the social traffic. For referrals, you'll see stuff occasionally, google.com. That's not necessarily coming from the search engine, but it could be coming from Gmail because it's mail.google.com is your domain. So there could be a number of services that are driving traffic there. If I were to click on a link in Analytics to go to a page, it's still going to show as google.com because of the domain here as a referral source. I can see the top pages in the site right now, what people are looking at. Right now, each only has 1 active visitor. I can see geographical. Right now, it's mostly, well, it's all US traffic right now, but depending on time zone, we've seen traffic where Australia has peaked higher than the US. We've seen traffic where Canada has peaked or the UK has peaked. So we're getting all of this information. And if there was any searches in organic search to come there, we just saw some updates right there as we're monitoring of new visitors. We'll get the keywords that people are typing into Google right here. Now we're only going to get the Google search results in Google Analytics. We're not going to know what Bing or Yahoo is doing because they don't have an impact into their own infrastructure. Plus, with this site, we've tied it to a Webmaster Tools account, so they're working hand in hand to deliver some of the information. So you're getting more accurate information here by doing that. When we're looking at implementing browsers, you can get what browsers are most relevant to your site right out of the tool, so long as the internet's still working. If the internet isn't working, we're going to have a really poor second half. We'll give it a sec. Okay, it's trying to load. While it's loading, let's see if Webmaster Tools responds if it's just an Analytics one. So I might jump back and forth with similar information. So with Webmaster Tools, well, we'll see. You can see I've got chkv in there twice, and that's because currently both domains resolve. They're both valid. So where is Google sending traffic? The keyword searches for this might be different than the keyword searches for this. I don't want to manage two sites, so this is where we'll come up with the URL redirecting we mentioned earlier. So from a management perspective, we can manage the search criteria going only to a single location within our site. One of our clients, like I mentioned earlier, we have language country combinations. We have to set one of those up for each language country combination so we can separate the search criteria differently. Okay, let's... Okay, Webmaster Tools wants to work, but Analytics does not. That's okay. We can work with this for now and jump back. So here we can see we target users in Canada. With CHKV, that stands for Canadians Helping Kids in Vietnam, we only want to focus on Canadian visits and optimize for Canadian residents to find this content. So we specifically choose Canadian users. We can choose from a large variety, or we can uncheck that and have no geographic target and just look at all traffic coming in from all of the Googles. But that may not help us if we're doing any form of regionalization optimization. So you may have 10 different instances of the same website in Webmaster Tools. One is set up to monitor Canada, one is set up to monitor the US, one is set up to monitor everything. It depends on what you need to implement to meet the goals of your site. It's tedious, but at least once you validate a site once, it uses the same validation code. It's just another entry in the list. You don't need to start uploading 12 different files to get 12 different markets. It's one file, you're done. You can also now validate in partnership with Google Analytics. So if you have a valid Google Analytics code on your site, you just say link to Google Analytics and it does it for you. You don't have to do anything else. It's really nice, and they're making it that much more effective and giving you information that works hand in hand. Like Analytics, there's a lot of data here. Well, okay, not this site. Again, we'll go back to Comic Booked. Maybe. There we go. So what we're getting in Webmaster Tools here is, oh, Googlebot can't access something on our site. So there's an important bug. Well, I didn't see that yesterday, but I didn't look yesterday in detail. But we're getting crawl errors on our site, and this is a lot of times very important. If you have major problems on your site, you want to know what to correct. This is going to help say, hey, Google couldn't find this page, or there's a problem on this page being rendered, or you're missing these criteria. This is going to help us because we can go into the crawl errors, and it's going to give us specific information. So, page not found. So it had a page in there, such as this one, on random. Okay, here's the URL. I can click it, see if it works. If it doesn't work for me, oh, then there's something else wrong. It's in my sitemap file, so it should exist if it's there, or which sitemaps if I need to update, if it's a static file. Where's linking to it? Huffington Post, some internal links are going there. Joss Whedon appears to be going there, at least, or a Whedon-esque site in the comments. This gives me the opportunity to see the errors within my site, correct the ones that are of value to me. Once that's done, I simply click Mark as Fixed, and Google will then go and know, okay, they've addressed this issue. You're being attentive to your site, and that actually lets them know to give a little bit more credence to what you're doing. So it'll reevaluate that page. You don't have to wait for it to go, okay, maybe I'll get there eventually. Google bots most frequently will come to your site every 24 hours or so, 24 to 48, depending on the site, at least from what we've noticed. But this lets it know that you're addressing the issues. So to make sure to look at this domain again, I've done something with this. Even if that is just a redirect to another page, you've at least addressed the issue that it flagged. Does that make sense? So some of the crawl stats, it'll let you know how often it's crawling you per day. So we've seen definitely some decline as we've had some other server issues. Now, we know we've had issues on our server of late, so this is understandably so. In the last month and a bit, we've had a lot of downtime thanks to our hosting provider. And that's through nothing we unfortunately can do anything about, but we're getting dinged by it. So we anticipated a lower crawl rate because always when they're crawling, they may not actually find a working site as they're doing their crawls, which really sucks for us. Blocked URLs are a way that you can tell them, you know what, don't index this. We don't look at this page, remove it, don't care. Our robots.txt file, who's not familiar with what a robots.txt is? Okay, a robots.txt file goes at the root of your site and basically is instructions for the bots. So here's a good example. We're telling it, here's two sitemap files that we have in our site, an index and a full sitemap file. So bot, go look at these. If you're going through organically and just like following links and looking at stuff in the site, no matter which bot you are, do not go in the CGI bin folder. Do not go in the WordPress admin folder. Do not go in all the WordPress additional folders that are there. There's no point. We don't want you there. You're not going to get any value out of there. It's just going to be like, why are you here in the first place? And control some of those.
Wouldn't most of the bots simply have that built into their logic in order to not waste inordinate amounts of time going through stuff that's going to not give them any value?
One would assume. But if everyone was on the same platform, it would be easy. WP admin, I could move WP admin and call it a different folder name, so it's difficult, it won't know. I could put it something else so that I'm not attacked, say, by someone who's trying to hack my site. Please don't hack my site. But you could put other elements in there. So with P equals, we're no longer using page equals ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For our structure. We're using a full name to help resolve it and give relevance to an end user. So if we find something with P, don't follow that because it's probably a preview page out of the WordPress CMS right now. Don't follow the comment pages. We don't care about rankings on what multi-page comments are going on or zooming in on a specific comment. This is a decision we made for the site. As we go through, we see other user agents. So I don't know what Doug Mirror is, but we've seen some sites that try to go into your site and try to then, again, crawl your site and basically make copies of it elsewhere. You know, this isn't a custom theme that we built. So for WordPress, it's one that we purchased that seemed to suit our needs. So if they're doing that, we don't care. But we don't want them bringing down the quality on our site of what's going on. Googlebot News, we want the news bot to go. So we say, go wherever you want, except for what is previously restricted up here. We're saying Googlebot image, we want you to look at us. The media partners look at us. Twitterbot, I don't know why they put Twitterbot. I didn't put Twitterbot. I see no relevance. I don't even know why Twitter has a bot. I'll be brutally honest. I've never seen it hit any of my work sites. We just have it there because I think our owner saw it once and decided to toss it in there. But what you can also then do is test these URLs. So if you have a bunch, okay, how is it validating? Does it follow the rules? You can plug the rules in and test it against a number of Google's bots, just to see what's going on. So Googlebot Mobile, you can test against their mobile bot to see, am I going to be found on a mobile environment? If I'm doing an image-specific search, is it finding the images I want? We had a couple of sitemap files at the top of that list. Those are just two. You can have a separate sitemap file just for images if you want to do focus there, so you show an image search. If you're doing an e-commerce site and there's a lot of product, that might be something you want to implement, so your products get a lot of visual focus so people can see what they're getting. Make sense? Any questions? Yes?
You have to explicitly allow bots like that?
You don't have to. What you want to do is, if you're doing, say, a basic Google bot, you're fine. If you're doing a basic Bing or some of those basic ones, you don't need to do anything. But you may want to choose disallow folders, no matter what, just to make sure they're going where you want them to go. I mentioned earlier with one of our clients, we put disallow rules on, say, the folder for registration for the site. We don't want forms to be submitted and errors to be thrown in our infrastructure as we do that. Now, I mentioned earlier too, single URL structure. All of these, especially in a Linux box, are case sensitive. So if you allow for a folder that is CGI bin and you're not doing any case matching, you need to also block a capital CGI bin before it can try to go through, or it can bypass those things. So more of the evil bots, and Baidu likes to try every trick in the book to get into your infrastructure. You might need to do some of those nasty little tweaks to get it going. It's a pain. It really is. So if you can have a single structure for your URL paths, if it's all lowercase or anything, then your server's already going to block it by the time any request gets there. Even the bot, as it goes through, sends a request to the server. Does it match this criteria? No. Redirect it to here. Okay, redirect here. Oh, I'm blocked. Don't go in. So there's a lot of those little tweaks earlier can actually come and help in the long run for stuff like this. You don't need to include all of these ones though, but if you want to focus, the mobile bot won't index your site by default, as an example, but you can tell it index my site, and here's where you can go, except for the rules above. The image one, it may not do a regular index of your site, but if you tell it, always come look at my site for new images, here's the XML file with all the images I want you to index, it will come and routinely look at that more frequently. So it may still find it, but now you can manage the frequency and some of the context of those images and how you'll rank. At least from what I've seen. And let's see. Traffic queries. Here is probably the meat and potatoes of Webmaster Tools. This only gives you Google because it has no information on what people search in other search engines. But someone searched for The Hobbit Part 2. Our site was found 4,500 times. An impression is it shows to an end user on a listing page. So if they get a page of 10 items, we made an impression on that page, at least one. How many times did that keyword put an article of ours onto the result page? 4,500 times. How many click through? 70. Not a great ratio. We'll see a 2% ratio for that phrase, but our average position on that was on page 1. We're at position 9.2 on average. So at least we're getting that visibility. What are the keywords that we are ranking on? Okay, Hobbit. Best episodes of the TV show Psych. We got a 24% click-through ratio, and we're up in position 3. This can help you identify if there's any keywords for your site that people are searching, you're showing, and maybe you want to sort it by your, I don't care if I'm number 1, I already know I'm up there, especially for my brand name. What's my worst keyword? Fanboy's acronym. My average position is 450, so I'm way down the list. Do I care about that one? Not so much. This one we might, because this is an ongoing comic book series and TV show. We are doing coverage of this. So for our site, we may want to do a focus on this to bring our ranking up for this keyword. This can give us that kind of visibility as to where we want to focus articles on our site. Us being a news site, delivering that kind of content, we want to know these kinds of things. Okay, people are searching for this, but no one is finding us. This one, again, may not be the best example because there's only 10 impressions, which means we never showed anywhere. Is it worth our time? It's a crapshoot. You can put criteria in, you can download all this to Excel and play with it. There are, in this case, 1,350 line items. So it can take a while to go through. So you may want to go in Excel and do some filtering in there. The online filters you can work with. Date ranges, like I'm just jumping around here. If there's anything specific you guys have questions on, just ask me. I'm just trying to focus on some of the elements where I've seen value. Optimization can show all your sitemaps on your site. So if you need to register one with them, it'll be there. That's still going. Let's try. All right. Seem to have lost some internet here. That's okay, because I can showcase some of the other tabs I have open in preparation, just in case this happened. We talked performance a little bit earlier, and some of that is how fast does your page load if there's a lot of stuff on your page. How many of you have sites where you put, say, remarketing codes and advertising codes to measure people coming to your site? Anyone? Okay, a couple. If you go to an average site, there may be about 50 different plugins on the site measuring different things. Google Analytics, there's a Twitter plugin, there's a Facebook plugin, there's all of these social media plugins. Ghostery is a browser extension that we use a lot. Basically, it's available for everything now that will tell you when you load up the page, here's all of the plugins that people are using on your site. So, oh, Google Analytics is here. Oh, they're also using Omniture. Well, that's interesting for multiple measurements. Plus, these ad payment systems are on here. Plus, we've got all of these other tools which are doing other calls out to various third-party services. So if you're calling out to a JavaScript file on your site, it's not going to show. But if you're linking out to a third-party service that's then putting something into your site, you're going to be able to get a good feel for what's going on, what other services are loading. And I've seen sites where the list will actually, it'll come up in a little pop-up, and if I get net access back, I'll show you. It will actually scroll so far down that I actually have to scroll the page of my website to see all the different services that some of these sites are loading. You go to a page like CBC or CNN, and those are some nasty examples of so much extra stuff getting loaded on your site. And if you're loading these things on a mobile browser, they're draining your battery. Every request out to a service is a battery drain, because it's another HTTP request out to the server. So if you could be actually harming your users, and they may not come back to your site on a mobile device if that's something you actually care about. Just an observation. Let's see if I can get this sucker working again.
It's not working, Kelly. I can share the internet back here.
All right. Well, let's just see if this goes. So the other tool I mentioned earlier, SEO Workers, is an example one here. Is you can put a URL in. We'll see if this one works. So let's go to... Now this one, because it does a page-by-page analysis, what it's going to do is take Google's best practices, and they have a bunch of videos in the result page, depending on how you rank. So they're going to make sure, though, that you're a real person and not a bot. So what is the next whole number after 3? Let's see if this goes, or if it's just Google. Let's see. No, I have limited access on the network. Okay, President Scroob. If it can connect. Well, if I need to, I'll switch laptops. This is why I have a backup. So let's do that quick. So 1 second. Let me make sure this one connects first before I do all that. While it does that, so what SEO workers will do when it's actually working was it will scan the site. It will scan all of the elements of the site.
You can try it again, Kelly, without password.
Okay. Without password?
Yeah.
Okay. Either that or it can't reach it because this one can't even find my other laptop can't even find it. So if that's the case, no worries. Let's see if it reconnects. And if not, I'll try this one, which is connecting. So I'm going to do a brief laptop switch. I once went to a client site for a presentation that ended up with me having to have on a plan D for a client demo on a third laptop I took with me, just because we took two work ones for different purposes. I took my personal one. So my personal one worked, not my work one, and running off of a virtual machine off of the personal one to do all the connections and everything I needed to do. I lost about 25 pounds in sweat because we were in front of the client while doing all of this at the same time. But it eventually all worked out. So let's go to Ghostery. And it doesn't want to work now.
Is it connected to my laptop or the?
To new media.
Try to connect to my laptop.
Okay, it couldn't find your laptop a second ago. And this one's not Windows 8.
Then I'm going to go get it.
We'll do one more reset of the network connection. All right, let's find an open one.
The MSTN public network.
Which one? MSTNG?
AMSC public.
AMSC public.
That one, some stuff is blocked, so it might work.
Okay.
The internet is. The internet is
Still identifying. So we'll let, there we, not fully done. Let's give it a shot. Nope. All right. So I'm going to do a quick switch then, back again. And what I'll do then is, let's see what's still visible there, if anything. Let's see if I got a cache. All right. I don't have Yoast up here. So what I can show is the SEO toolkit. Not well, but I can show you a result that I ran earlier, so at least we can take a look at something here. So I mentioned, though, that the SEO workers one will be scanning the page and give you some relevance as to what the errors are. When we launch a new site, we also use the SEO toolkit quite frequently. So this is a Microsoft product. It's an extension of the Windows operating system, so it won't run on a Mac or anything. It's not going to give you every little nuance for your infrastructure, but it will give you some good analysis reports. So I ran this earlier today against CHKV. I'm now glad I did, just to have it in here to showcase. And when I look at the report, it's going to give me how many links it found in the site, 648. That's going to cover some cross-link within my infrastructure. But it's also going to tell me different violations that it found while scanning the infrastructure. So different levels as well. So I've got my errors. These are the ones, obviously, I'll want to give significant focus on. So the page contains multiple canonical formats. This is where we're getting to the multi-case scenario, where it's actually being scanned by these tools saying you can access this by 2 different URLs. So here we've got, in this case, it's actually a different URL goes to the same page because the gallery root page has the same content as a specific page. Yes?
This one, does it only work live as well, or does it work local?
This one you can run against a local host or another site there. So it's looking just at whatever domain names. Now it does need to be set up on a machine and not just like a file system path, but if it's set up in a Windows machine in your web server, it can run. Now you could be running Apache on your on a Windows machine and this will still run, or you could be running it on a Mac server in your network and you can still execute this. It just needs to resolve via a proper URL structure in order to do this analysis. But it gives you all the information. Here's some information. Recommended action. Where is it coming? I've got my status code. It's still coming back as a 200 HTTP code, so I know the page itself is a valid code. I don't need to worry about it coming back as a page not found or a weird redirect page. It'll give me some information on to where specifically it is. In this case, there is no actual content error, so it's not really highlighting anything. My HTTP headers. It gives me all of this data for all of the different errors that are encountered. In this case, image tag doesn't have an alt attribute defined. Which image? It's telling me every single image that doesn't have that. So if I want to use that as my strategy and I want to make sure we've got the alt attribute, it will give me the detail I need to fix up my site. Multiple H1 tags. There's 2 on this page. Or in this case, it doesn't have one at all. Okay? Meta description is missing. This truly is a warning because a meta description is optional for your site. You don't need it. It just helps manage that snippet that you see in the Google search page. This is one that's starting to show up more and more. The link text is not relevant. So if you have something there and you just say, click here, does that tell you what your destination is? Not really. So they're starting to put some relevancy on the text around your links within the site too. If you just say click here, there's no context. If you say click here to view the video on YouTube, you've got context of what the user can expect and it gives you some more information. So view the video on YouTube with a link that goes to YouTube, it can validate that it's a relevant link to that system. Additionally, you can put on those links title attributes in the code, which can really give it more detail of what the user can expect as well. And then we have a performance warning. There's a large amount of script code on this page. So if you take a look at it, their definition of large significantly differs from my definition of large. But if you can put your JavaScript in a different file and minify it and serve it up so it can get cached by the user, because this code is presumably going to be on every page in your site, why not have that file cached and optimize some performance on your site? It can tell you where you should focus your time with most violations. I've got 16 errors on this page, and you know what? Maybe fixing those 16 fix 90% of everything else. We've had that happen when we've run this tool. Some performance analyses, where are some of the bottlenecks. We've got 121 images are downloaded when we scan the site. I'm actually surprised it's that low, I'll be honest. Content types, so some of the different formats, and sometimes you'll have errors if it doesn't recognize the type of the file that it's downloading. It may take a while longer and may kind of kick you in the butt. I don't know why we have a GIF, but whatever. Links to the site. This is all internal links, so this isn't going external and finding who's coming in and linking through to you. But our most linked pages, going to the home page, going to the sponsor page. Blocked by robots? Nothing, because these guys have yet to implement a robots.txt on their site. They're that. I just kind of took this over in more detail about a month ago, so I haven't done any updates or any implementation to fix them yet, but I'm moving them from a static site probably to WordPress so that every little update they want to do, I don't have to do a local change, do a code deploy, FTP it up to their server, position it, and I don't want to have to do every little nook and cranny content update. They can do that for themselves. But I'll be their webmaster going forward and help them with some of those strategies. Different protocols, they've got a bunch of mail to links, so you can see if you're doing that. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, depending on what you want to measure. At my day job, we try to stay away from mail tos because bots will scan those URLs and start spamming some of our clients, especially if it's the CEO of a company. You may not want to have his email address clickable or follow through from there, so it's coming from your site. A lot of times we'll put a data capture form instead and mail him behind the scenes for all of that to go through. It's not going to give you everything for your site. Like, it's not going to scan your site and say you're going to rank on this keyword. This keyword is giving you all the benefit. It won't do that, but it's going to give you the structure of your site and some of the elements you may want to focus on, so you can then focus more on the content as you move forward. So if you're building something by hand or something on WordPress, if you're using WordPress, you can use this to find if there's errors in the theme you're using, because there's a lot of WordPress plugins, there's a lot of WordPress themes. Not all of them are quality, but there's a lot of really good ones too. We found a few plugins that have actually crashed our site and don't work well with other plugins. So when you're doing WordPress, it becomes a challenge. I'm going to see if I can connect again just for fun, because I'd like to do a quick show of Yoast if I can. Probably not. I'll disconnect him. See what happens there. I guess going to that point, though, not being able to dive in, are there any questions? And we'll see what we can answer without internet access.
While you guys are asking for answering questions, if you don't mind filling out your eval, if you guys need a pen, I can walk around, flag me down, and I'll give you a pen.
You have VGA or HTML?
Pardon me?
You have a VGA connection on there, I'm assuming?
Yep.
I got a cell stick here, but it works.
Yeah, it's a couple of minutes. So if there's questions, I can always give you guys my email and everything. So you first.
Question about, let's say in a continuous integration setting or a staging server, can you fire these reports, trigger them from a build, or work them into that process?
I believe there is a command line to execute. I haven't done it. You probably need to use a PowerShell script to execute, because it's a Microsoft executable, and it's within IIS extension. So there's got to be a way to execute with a PowerShell script, especially if you're on an IIS 7 or 7.5 server. You can probably use some kind of script to start the execution, give it the domain and the parameters, and just go.
Yeah, that would be neat to keep things tidy before you go.
Depends how often you're doing continuous integration. If you're doing a new build every 5 minutes, it may not even finish scanning before your next build, and you're going to get different errors showing up. So you may want to even set up as a scheduled process, say every couple hours. Depending on it depends on how long your build takes. If your build takes 2 hours to execute because you have a lot of projects, it's a lot of projects in your solution, manage it accordingly. Don't do it on every check-in though, and every build, because it may still be scanning by the time your next build goes in or your next developer checks in code. Hi.
Bounce rate.
Yes.
What's your gut on what's good, what's bad? Like, where's the line in the sand?
Google has said their line in the sand. They recommend if it's 40% or less, you're in a good state. From what I've seen, though, if you have it less than 10%, something is skewing the numbers. So a 10 to 40% is probably good. We aim for a lot of our clients to be around a 20 to 25% is a good number. And if you're consistent around that rate, late last year, and we've seen this with some of our clients that work with other agencies, they want to do a performance test on their site. There's a bot out there, a specific one called Gomez, that will run against your site and test its site performance. It is one of the few bots that will execute JavaScript. So it will actually skew your actual view metrics unless you exclude it in analytics. And you'll notice something is off if suddenly your site goes to having maybe not significantly more traffic, but your bounce rate on your homepage jumps up, say, from 20% to 80, 85%.
Okay, I'm sorry, that was
Yeah.
to do here is still like a sandbox for our work.
Yeah.
Where we have a 75% bounce rate of company we've acquired.
Okay.
Um,
Generally, if you're, I say between,
this Gomez thing,
Gomez is a bot that just, it's a performance. Now you have to pay this company to do it. So if you're not paying it, odds are that's not going to be an issue you'll have.
got it. Thank you.
If you want to measure your site, you can pay that company to do it. Just know you might see a spike unless you exclude it in your analytics temporarily. But it will help you measure how effective your site is from a performance standpoint. That's its intent.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else while we're...
How do you spell Yoast?
Pardon me?
Yoast, what is that?
Yoast. Basically, I'll try to describe it because I don't have the screen up. I have a very small version of it in the PowerPoint. See if I can get back to the screen with it. Not very well. So there's multiple areas of the Yoast section. So it will actually show you what your snippet is going to be in Google by the time you finish doing these optimizations. So you first enter in a keyword. Now this isn't, say, a meta keyword that you'll see on your site. But this keyword is one, this page is about, again, I'm going to go the comic book route. This page is about Batman. So Batman is my keyword. Does Batman show on my page? Is it in my title of my page? It's in my headline in WordPress? Yep, score. Do I want to use my headline as my title tag that shows, no, I don't, I want something custom? Okay, I can put that in here and it will update this for me too. So I can customize my page title without worrying too much about impacting the article itself. So my article will have an article title, and then I can have a page title which is separate, and I can manage that very clearly here. I can plug in a meta description as well, so I can manage my snippet that's going to show here. When I save my article as draft, it's going to give me in the little publish box a little circular icon that is going to be gray if it can't tell anything. If you're missing the keyword it's tracking on, it's going to be gray. If your SEO is poor, it's going to give you, or if it really, really sucks, it's going to give you red. So it's basically a red, yellow, green structure. If you're good, you're in a kind of a gray area, you could be a little better, or you really, really suck. One of the nice things this tool does over some of the others as well is Yoast will let you manage your sitemap if you need to in there. So you can do a lot of these tools right in the Yoast plugin to help out WordPress. It won't do your robots, but there's plugins for that. But it has a tab which you can kind of see there called social. So if you have a social sharing access on your site, say you want to share to Facebook, it will let you choose, you can customize a unique snippet for what you'll see in that Facebook share when people say so-and-so liked this. Here's the name of the page, and here's that little brief description. You can manage that through one tool for all of the different elements of the site. So it gives you that kind of control without having to be an ultra coder, diving into the infrastructure, doing all the coding yourself. It just gives you that management component right within the WordPress structure itself. So if you're doing a site like we are, we've got 20 different writers in there. They can manage their article themselves, and I just have to go in and, yeah, this is good, yeah, this is bad, approve, publish, go. Okay, anything else? Okay, so I'm going to go right to the end because we couldn't get to close everything. But remember, not every website will have the same structure. There's a lot of stuff you can do, but not everything will be relevant to what you're doing. It depends on your needs. There's a lot of tools out there. I tried to cover at least some of the ones that I use regularly, which is Webmaster Analytics, and I use that SEO toolkit very, very regularly. Before we launch any new site, I run it on a local infrastructure server just to make sure we've got all our I's dotted and our T's crossed. If you do have any questions, because we didn't get to finish it, there's how you can contact me. Please do, and I'll answer your questions whenever I can. Twitter, I'm not on as frequently of late, but if you send me a private message, it doesn't give me a notification on my phone. If you send me just a straight @ message, I'll get it, and I'll try to get back to you. Or you can get me at my email or on LinkedIn. And with that, thank you very much. I'm sorry we didn't get to finish every little nook and cranny. I know that we were talking about getting right into analytics, but if you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to help you out.
All right, thanks, Kelly.
Thanks.
All right. So before we go, we have the, it's like, what was it? It's like a, totally can't think of the word that I was thinking of at the top of my head. Anyway, we have the draw. So we were racking our brains for prizes for this session, and we were like thinking, what could we give away that's sort of like, you know, relates to analytics and website. I was like, we should get like a Sherlock Holmes detective kit or something like that with like a magnifying glass. But no, everyone vetoed that idea. So we got iTunes gift cards, which we figure pretty much everybody can use, or they can give to a nephew or son or daughter, which will get some use out of those. So we've got $100 for the paid members, and we're going to give away, what is it here? We've got 3, so I got all the evals from everybody. No one's missing. All right, I'm going to give these a shuffle. I'll pick 3 from here. This is a crude. Yeah. How? Not all the other tickets. Not everybody came though. So basically, all the tickets we have in there are the ones that are basically good. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Pick 3 out of here. Shoot down the back.
Maxime
I can't pronounce that last name.
from Visual Lizard.
There we go.
Did I pronounce your first name right at least? Yes.
There you go. Sorry for my handwriting.
This is, see, I don't write, I print because I can't read my own handwriting half the time. Ben Rogers.
Back?
Yeah.
I got one more. Warren? Warren Eaton?
Yeah.
I think that's what that
think
says. There we go. Okay. So
Beauty.
that's the first 3. There you guys go.
Thank you very much.
All right. So the $100. Let's come out of this box.